Thank you for coming to Authors at Google today. My name is Heath Rowe, and I'm here to introduce Bonnie Schneider. Bonnie is a meteorologist appearing on various media platforms, including CNN and HLN. She's also an author of a new nonfiction book, Extreme Weather, which you should have copies of. Bonnie is the on-camera extreme weather expert and co-executive producer of a new special on the DIY network called Last House Standing, premiering at the end of March. Produced by Tower Productions, it's a one-hour special that shows homeowners everything they need to know about being proactive to protect their homes from hurricane-force winds, torrential rains, and devastating earthquakes. Being in Southern California, hopefully we'll learn a little bit today about mudslides, wildfires, and the Santa Ana winds. Ladies and gentlemen, Bonnie Schneider.
Thank you all so much for having me. It is such a pleasure to be here at Google and to be in California. I was just here a month ago to shoot this special Last House Standing for DIY. We went to Northridge, the site of a major earthquake in 1994, and kind of recapped what happened and retrofit some homes. So I look forward to sharing that special with you. I have a handout on it on the DIY network on March 30th. Well, without further ado, I want to get to my book, Extreme Weather, which really was an amazing experience for me to write. And I'm so excited that the book is finally out. It seemed like it took forever to get it all together, to get it written and on the shelves, and now it's here. So this book is a survival guide to all types of extreme weather. Here in California, a lot of people outside of California think you guys have perfect weather all the time, but you, as residents, you know that's not the case. There's quite a bit of extreme weather in the state of California. And through the research of this book, I actually spoke to many experts in California as well as storm survivors in California. You can see my book covers many topics, including flash floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, wildfire, heat waves, snowstorms, tsunamis, all types of natural disasters. And specifically for two of the chapters, I spoke to storm survivors here in California. And the first one was the landslide chapter. And some of you may remember the devastating landslide that occurred in La Conchita, California in 2005. People were killed. It was a real tragedy. It was in January, so right around this time of year. One of the women I interviewed was a young woman, 18 years old, and she was staying in La Conchita because she was in school in Santa Barbara. And she was heading to class. The winter semester had just begun. They just finished the Christmas break. And it had been raining for days, but she still wanted to get a head start and head out to school. So she got on the road heading from La Conchita to Santa Barbara, only to find mud flow ahead of her and behind her. Eventually, they shut down the highway, and while it was inconvenient, she figured that was really the worst of it. Officials came and told her she had to leave her car on the road, and she did, along with many other residents, and they took them back to town, and she decided she'd just sit it out and go back to her house. So she goes to the upper level of her house, which was where the living room was, and just when she picked up her cell phone to make a call, she noticed that a side of the wall was buckling in, and something told her this wasn't an earthquake because it wasn't a shaking motion. It wasn't happening on both sides of the house. It was just one side of the house. So instinctively, she grabbed her phone and started to dart down the stairs to exit the house. And just then, she felt dirt coming on top of her face and hitting her in the eye. And that's all she remembers. The entire house collapsed around her. And just by sheer luck, she was on that staircase. So the staircase, the way she fell, kind of acted as a barrier. And along with a bookcase that collapsed just to the top of her, but not on her, it gave her kind of a triangle area where she could breathe and survive this devastating landslide. Unbeknownst to her, there was a neighbor of hers who was heading in the other direction on the highway when the mud flow closed it. He was heading home from work. He was an ER nurse returning from Santa Barbara to La Conchita, and he had done an overnight shift. And instead of going home to bed, he got on his bicycle and decided he's going to look around the neighborhood and see what's going on. Well, sure enough, he heard that popping sound of the landslide, and then he saw it. The whole hillside crushing down on the town and on homes. So he got on his bicycle and he got off to where he thought was the worst of the area, and he just called out, "I'm here to help. Can I help you?" And he heard muffled cries of not just Nicole, the young woman who was trapped, but many people. So he just listened to where he could hear the loudest sound and just dug with his hands. And he managed to find Nicole and rescue her. And she had a bad gash on her leg, but she survived. And miraculously, these two were reunited again. And Bill, the man who found Nicole, was invited to her wedding about a year or two later. And her grandmother grabbed his hands and just said, "You saved our daughter's life." And I have stories like this throughout the book at the beginning of every chapter of Extreme Weather, that the people that I've interviewed directly, some of the stories you've never heard before, some are exclusive to the book. But this book isn't just about survivor stories, even though every chapter has one. It really gets into practical how-to advice, because I think all of us can agree that extreme weather can happen at any time to anyone in any circumstance. And this was just a young woman going to school, and she got caught up in almost a tragedy of loss of life, but she survived. So many of the people that I interviewed were on their way to work or to school or on a vacation when this extreme weather struck. So it was my goal with this book to provide readers with the information they would need to be proactive to prepare for extreme weather. And that means not only preparing, but also giving practical advice of what to do if you're in your car and the road floods, what to do if you're on foot during a snowstorm, or how to react if you're in an office building and there's an earthquake, which can happen right here where we are. So the book Extreme Weather talks a lot about those scenarios, including tornadoes.
Oh my God.
You think?
Yeah, it looks like it's going that way. Dude, look at all the trees.
You have the legit camera out.
What you just looked at, that was actually footage of the beginning of what was coming into Tuscaloosa, Alabama just this past year. Tornado season has been tremendously difficult across the South, the Midwest, much of the country. In 2011, 552 people lost their lives in tornadoes. That's record-breaking numbers for April and for May. And this one in Tuscaloosa was an EF5 tornado, which means winds greater than 200 miles per hour. Another EF5 we all heard about last year was in Joplin, Missouri. So tornadoes are one example of extreme weather, but I think it's important to show because everybody thinks it's going to happen to someone else.
I looked at my dad and he goes, "Buddy, it's going to hit us." And I'm just staring at him. I'm like, "No, it can't hit us." And he goes, "It's going to hit us. We have to go downstairs now."
So the question is, how do you prepare? Whether it's a flash flood, a hurricane, a tornado, a snowstorm, wildfire. There's so many different types of natural disasters that happen across the country. And not only do we want to protect ourselves, but we also want to protect our family and our pets. The woman that you see in the picture in the corner of the screen holding the cat, that's Mary. And Mary is someone I interviewed in the early stages of this book, actually when I was writing the book proposal a couple years ago. And she's a Hurricane Katrina survivor that I found on Facebook and contacted her that way. And she said to me, when I sent her an email, I found her on a survivor page of Hurricane Katrina, and I reached out to her that I was writing this book, and her message back to me was, "If you are indeed the real Bonnie Schneider, I will talk to you. If you're some kind of imposter, I won't." I was thinking, of course I'm me, you know. But she turned out to have an incredible story. I just scratched the surface from what I read about her comments on Katrina. This woman was separated from her beloved pets during Katrina, like many people were, and you'll read in the book what happened. I don't want to give away the story, but it's an incredible story of what happens when you're, in that dire circumstance of having to evacuate with very little notice, and you have animals to take care of. So that's something that I talk a lot about in extreme weather. In fact, every chapter of this book features advice on how to care for your pet as well as your family. So even if you're looking at the wildfire chapter, I interviewed an animal expert here in California who treated animals injured in wildfire and had practical tips for that. So each chapter is specific to whatever your interest is, and maybe you're traveling to Florida or to the Gulf Coast during the summer season and you're interested in learning about hurricane preparation. There's that information for you as well if you travel. So a lot about what I talk about is how to prepare, and you could do a lot to prepare before the storm hits or before the disaster hits. And one of those ways, and I think the main thing you'll find I echo throughout the book, is to have a no-weather radio. Does anyone have one of these already at home? Oh, that's actually a pretty good number because most of the time when I ask that question, no hands go up. So that's great. A no-weather radio is a special kind of radio. It doesn't mean it's necessarily very expensive. You can get some for under $30. But what this radio does is it's tuned into a special frequency from NOAA and the National Weather Service, and this way you can get these updated watches and warnings for your area. One of the reasons these radios are so important, and some of them have hand cranks. If you lose power, you want to make sure they're battery operated because you can't rely on electricity, and you might lose it during a storm. But the most important feature I think that these radios have is they have an alarm mode. So if your area is under a tornado watch or you're under any kind of weather advisory and you go to bed and you're wondering, well, what happens if the storm hits and we're all asleep? This radio will wake up and it'll alert you that your county is under a warning. And it will give you the information you need if you needed to evacuate or to seek shelter, for example. So this is something that every family should have. And another reason you should have it is because so many of us go on vacation or we go away for the weekend, and the last thing we're thinking about is how the forecast is going to be because you just want to get out and enjoy your vacation. Well, some of the people that I interviewed, especially on national campgrounds, said that that's a huge problem, that people don't check the forecast before they go, and they set up camp and they're susceptible to lightning or to flash floods and things like that. So just knowing what the weather is and keeping track of it before you head out and while you're away is so important because many of these situations I found in my research could be avoided. Of course, sometimes they can't, but if you can do anything to be proactive, it's important that you do that. Now, during the time of a storm, many of us might find ourselves at home stuck. I know in Atlanta, Georgia last year, Atlanta is a city that typically doesn't see a lot of snow. So when it snows, the whole city shuts down. And for us, in January of 2011, we had a snow and ice storm. And I'll never forget it because we didn't have power, some of us, for a week or two. Imagine that, and not only do you not have power, but the roads are covered with ice because there's not enough snowplows. So you can be homebound in these situations, and it can happen here in California as well. So you may have your food supplies and your water supplies, but I give more information in the book that's very specific. How much food should you have? For how many people? What if you have pets? How do you calculate that? What about prescription drugs if you have that, or someone who has special needs in your home? How do you take care of them as well? So I'll give specific advice, a checklist on these emergency supplies. It's one of the final chapters of the book that you can take with you and see, do we have everything we need at home? What do we need to buy? And it's just this way, it's peace of mind that you have everything. And I just want to point out something that may seem obvious, but you'd be surprised that sometimes it isn't. If you keep a lot of canned goods, make sure you have one of these, a manual can opener, because if you lose power and you're using an electric can opener, you're going to really want to get to your supplies and you won't. So that's something very important to remember. Now, sometimes a disaster happens and we're not homebound. We have to get out. Now, this was really evident to me in the wildfire chapter I did. I interviewed quite a few firefighters and captains here in Los Angeles County Fire Department. I talked to people in Malibu who had been through extreme fires in 2007, and they were evacuated, and they really told me what it was like to have that knock at the door and say, okay, you have to leave now, or you have 10 minutes. What do you do? So this picture actually is from Hurricane Rita in 2005, and this is outside of Houston, Texas. So this is what it could look like on the highway, and everyone's trying to get out. You can even see some people just gave up and pulled to the side of the road. So you want to make sure that your family has a disaster plan, and there's a lot of different factors that go into that in terms of making sure everyone in the family knows what their role is if you had to evacuate. Does everyone know where you'd meet in the house, how to reach each other? If you all have cell phone numbers, make sure it's all grouped together for friends and family so quickly you can reach each other. And another thing I've mentioned earlier about pets, and this is really key because, again, this could be a big concern. If you have a pet and you want to take it to a shelter, make sure you have the proper carrier, because some people will come up to a shelter with a cardboard box full of kittens and they won't take you. So you have to have the proper carrier. And you're probably wondering, well, I can have the carrier, but my dog or cat is stubborn and they won't get in it. There are tips in the book on how to how to teach your animal how to be more comfortable in a storm situation. A lot of dogs, for example, are frightened during thunderstorms, and the sound of the thunder really frightens them, or flash of lightning. So I have some tips on that, how to keep everybody calm and evacuate in an orderly way. And in terms of reaching everyone, and this is something everyone here at Google is probably even more familiar with than most of the people, is how do you use social media in a natural disaster and emergency? During last year's tsunami and earthquake in Japan in March of 2011, we saw incredible use of Twitter and Facebook and all sorts of social media to communicate, because a lot of people couldn't communicate with their cell phones. So how do you use social media in a weather emergency? Well, the first thing you want to do is make sure that you know how to use social media and not wait till the disaster hits. And I give some practical advice, as well as tips on who to follow on Twitter, and maybe some things that you didn't already know, free information that's available to you, because you want to make sure that even if you're working here at Google, you might be the most technologically savvy person in your family. Make sure everyone in your family can upload photos and communicate possibly with a geolocation tool, so you can find each other. Because often in a disaster, I mentioned the wildfire knock at the door, that could happen when parents are at work, kids are at school, someone's at a friend's house, and that's why social media can really come in handy and help you. And I think that that's a really unique chapter to the book, and I'm happy about that we were able to include that in there. So the book really is a survival guide, and it's really a tool that you can consult. You read it once. It has a lot of bullet points, so it's a pretty easy read, but it's something you can go back to. And if you're traveling, you can take a quick glance. For example, I know that we can be threatened by tsunami here on the West Coast. Just recently, there was a tsunami warning actually up and down the West Coast. But for many, you don't encounter a tsunami unless maybe you're traveling, or you don't think about it, for example. And in the tsunami survivor I interviewed for this book, I have to tell you, that story, even as I was writing it, I was glued to my computer, because it's so incredible that this man survived. He was on vacation in Phuket, Thailand in 2004 when that tsunami hit. And he literally saw the sea pull back, far, far back. So it was as if he saw the bottom of the ocean. Imagine what that would look like, that sight, and how disconcerting it is to look out and expect to see the sea, but you see sand and little puddles of water with fish popping up. So he saw the water recede and pull back before the horrible waves of the tsunami came in and killed so many there. So his first-person account that I'm able to tell in this book is really riveting, because he's from California, and he worked overseas, and that's where he was vacationing over the Christmas holiday. So he found himself on vacation having to seek higher ground in a tsunami, something he didn't really grow up understanding or knowing what to do. So knowing about these different phenomena, while you may not think it applies to you right now, you may find someday you'll be somewhere, and it's good to know. So I really wanted to get all this information out to everyone in a really concise and easy way. As a meteorologist, I have the experience of talking about these events when they're happening and breaking news in that situation. But I find what really is on my mind is that if I can do anything to help people prepare and have them feel more empowered and less frightened, frankly, of extreme weather, then that's really what I'm setting out to do with this book. I can remember I had just started at CNN in 2005, and it was the summertime, and I was so excited to be working there. And a month later, Katrina hit, and I was only on the air a couple months, and I remember driving. It was 10 o'clock at night, and my job was, they said to me, you're going to cover overnights, midnight to 4 a.m. And I thought, okay, that sounds good. So the weather advisory for Katrina that we were getting from the National Hurricane Center, from the local National Weather Service along the Gulf Coast, it was so dire, and the language was so, it's so indelible in your mind. You can't forget how serious the warnings were. I mean, we remember that at the time. So I was driving to work, and I was holding onto the steering wheel, and I remember I was thinking, like, do people realize how serious this is? Because people can get very complacent. If a hurricane doesn't hit year after year, they think, oh, it's going to happen to someone else, like you saw in that video. Even the young boy said, well, it's not going to hit our house. So that was really the beginning of the idea for this book for me, is that I wanted to be able to get that information out. For example, in a tornado you may know that the best place to be is the safe room in your house, a closet, a bathroom, or a basement. But I also give you some other tips. For example, if you're driving or you find yourself in an open area, I just wanted to try to cover all bases of where you could possibly be when extreme weather hits. So that's a little bit about my book, and it was really something I've been working on for a long time, and I'm really delighted to share it all with you. And that's a little review I got from Kirkus. That was the first review I got. And that's kind of what I was happy with that review for many reasons. But one is that it's a lightweight book, and I kind of wanted people to be able to tote it with them when they travel and keep in their car or give as a gift to someone, just so you can show that you care and you want your family to stay safe. So that's a little bit about my book. I just want to mention also, you can see that the foreword is written by Max Mayfield. You may have heard of Max. He was the former director of the National Hurricane Center during Katrina. He was on television all the time back then. And Max really is a legend for all of us meteorologists. I mean, he is really incredible I've had the opportunity to interview him on CNN. So for him to write this forward was a real honor for me, and it's a privilege. And I hope that you all read it, because he really knows firsthand what can happen during the worst case scenario when you're prepared and when you're not prepared. And he's been around a lot longer than me, so he can really give you that firsthand information right at the top of the book. So that's a little bit about the book, Extreme Weather. And I thank you so much for having me here. I'd really love to hear your questions, specific to anything you have here in California or anywhere in the country. Yes.
For us here in California, if you're in a workplace, can you sort of outline for us the best places to, how we should evacuate, if we should stay within the building? I know a lot of people have a tendency to try to leave the building immediately if there's debris and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's actually true, because in the research I did for the earthquake chapter, I found that people do rush out of buildings, and that's sometimes how some of the worst injuries occur, because debris can be falling off a building. Really, the best advice that I received from the earthquake chapter is to drop cover and hold on. Wherever you are, get under a desk and hold on. The earthquake itself won't last usually that long, but you want to stay under something that can protect you from debris. By the risk of running out of the building, you're risking getting hit by something on your way out. Obviously, you want to stay away from any windows, and that's true of any extreme weather events. And, whether you're at the workplace or whether you're at a hotel on vacation or you're at a friend's house, always be aware of where the exits are and how you could get out. For example, in the tsunami chapter, I talk a lot about being aware of how to reach higher ground. And that's also true if you're camping, because people find themselves in areas that can flood, and you could be in a tent or that sort of situation. So you want to know all the escape routes and the way to evacuate quickly. Does anyone else have a question?
I was going to ask what the worst natural disaster you've seen.
I would probably say, I recently, for the DIY special, I had the opportunity to go to Tuscaloosa just a month ago. And remember, that tornado hit last year in April. So here it is, almost a year later, and you can still see the exterior of a building completely gone and all the damage. And it's amazing. I mean, I don't think I would have believed if I didn't see it in person. And I'm seeing it after a lot of the area has been cleaned up. So seeing the devastation of a tornado, I think, has a real impression on me. But reporting even from the studio and talking about all these different disasters also kind of stayed with me. And I've had the opportunity to talk about everything on the air that's in the book. I haven't seen everything personally, but I've had a chance to at least explore reporting on it. And through the book, interviewing people who were there.
What do you think is kind of the biggest disaster waiting to happen?
That's a good question. I think it really depends on where you are. I think that 2011 was an epic year for extreme weather. We had 14 natural disasters costing billions of dollars for the country. The worst of it, more than half of the people that were killed in tornadoes. So I do think that because of the growth of the population and the development of where people are living, more people will be impacted by extreme weather. So it really depends on where you are in terms of what could be the worst situation. And we're seeing a lot of stuff that people have said to me, and I used Alabama as an example when I was just there, we don't see these big tornadoes in Alabama. They think, oh, well, this is something you'd see in Oklahoma. Well, this type of extreme weather can happen, and it can be devastating. I mean, here in California, just about every year we have the fire season where we're talking about homes being evacuated, and sometimes it's you're talking about tens of thousands of people having to leave their home. So it depends on where you are and how you're impacted. If last year also we had record drought and fire in Texas, for example, and the heat that persisted there. It was incredible last year. We had so many days where we had consecutive triple-digit days in Dallas, for example, record-breaking heat even in Newark, New Jersey. So the extremes are definitely happening all over, wherever you are. I haven't gone to any place yet, and I've been traveling a little bit for this book that hasn't had something where they have that perfect weather. Any other questions?
I'm kind of interested in tsunamis, actually.
Okay.
You know, obviously 2 massive tsunamis within the last 10 years.
Mm.
And I've just moved to this neighbourhood, and you see the tsunami warning signs and evacuation signs around here. Do you know much about how prepared we are in Venice? Like, for instance, my house, I have to have tsunami coverage for my insurance in my house. Like, do you know about?
I'm not sure about how the specific city is prepared, but the fact that you know that you're in an area at risk for tsunami is really half the battle. A lot of the interviews I've done for this book, people didn't know they were in an area where a landslide could occur or a tsunami could occur. So tsunami warnings have improved, and they especially improved after 2004. So we can be more prepared on sea, higher ground. And you're right, we've had 2 huge tsunami events related, of course, to 2 massive earthquakes immediately preceding them. So the risk is there, and it's important that you know that even here in the U.S., because I think until Japan hit, and then we had that advisory and warning, we had it on the West Coast. Remember that camera that was poised watching Hawaii, and we were all waiting to see what happened? I mean, I think that really woke people up that this could happen in the U.S. Anybody in the back? Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. I hope you enjoyed the lecture, and I hope you enjoyed the book.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.